Hi everyone, I hope you're all well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Malin, and for those of you who do, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to share some of Rob and my favorite weeknight meals. So they're pretty simple meals that have pretty simple ingredients, but they're really yummy, and I'd like to think that they are pretty healthy as well. And in this one, I've focused more on sort of spring and summer meals. I've done videos similar to this before, and I'm very glad that you've enjoyed them so much. So I hope you will enjoy this video equally, and let's get into it. Before we get to cooking, I want to say a big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes on creative topics that are all split into shorter lessons so that you can fit them into your schedule. And you can learn anything from things like photography, videography, illustration, and different crafts, to learning how to work better as a freelancer, how to organize your work and be more productive. The classes keep me inspired, and they also allow me to explore my creativity further. As my ceramics class here in the local area has come to a close for this season, I decided to top up my knowledge on the craft on Skillshare. And the class I'm currently doing is called Ceramics at Home, Building Dishes by Hand. In it, Emily Reinhardt shows how to make unique pieces in the comfort of your own home using only a few tools. And yeah, she shows you basically how to turn a lump of clay into a beautiful piece of glazed ceramic that you can use around the house. And yeah, I find it really inspiring. I'm hoping to be able to make some pieces at home while I'm waiting for my next class in the studio. If you would like to check out Emily's class or any other class on Skillshare for that matter, the first 1,000 of you to click the link in the description box will receive 2 whole months free of charge access to Skillshare Premium, which gives you full access to the whole site to try any class you like. But for now, let's do some cooking. The first recipe I'm making is a rice and stir-fry bowl with a zesty broth. And to start, I'm going to make some rice. I'm using white rice here, but you could use brown rice or wild rice. It's totally up to you. And what I do when I cook rice is that I rinse it several times until the water comes out clear. And then I cook it 1 part rice to 2 parts water. While the rice cooks, I'm going to prepare the other 2 components of this dish. And the first one is to prep the veggies for the stir fry. So here I have a leek that I chop up quite roughly. And I'm also chopping up some carrot into little batons. And as always, you can find the full recipes and measurements linked down below in the description box. So to go with the carrots and the leeks, I'm also slicing up some cabbage, and I'm going to chop up some broccoli florets to go with that. And since I'm not using the whole broccoli, I'm just using the florets, but if you were using the whole broccoli, you could also use the stem. Then I'm slicing up some pak choi, and I like to separate the leaf from the stem and chop the stem and then just rip the leaves into smaller pieces, but you could totally cook them whole as well. And yeah, I cook them at different stages, and that's why I separate them. I set those veggies aside and I chop up some garlic, which is one of the flavorings for the stir fry, and I'm also grating some fresh ginger, which serves the same purpose. Then I set that aside as well, and I make a mixture for the broth. So here I have some miso paste, and I'm using some chili oil. I'm using a light miso paste, but you could use any type you like. Then I'm also zesting some lime into the mixture, and using the zest gives it that really zingy, deep citrus flavor that I like for this dish. But I'm also going to squeeze in the juice because of course there's plenty of flavor there as well. And finally, I'm just gonna mix this together to a paste. So I add a little bit of water to make this easier, but of course we're gonna add this to more hot water later to make a nice broth. But for now, this is the consistency you're looking for, and we're gonna set that aside while we stir fry the veggies. So I add a little bit of oil to a frying pan, or you could use a wok if you have one. Then I saute the ginger and the garlic until it's fragrant. It only takes about a minute. And then I pop all the veggies except for the pak choi leaves into the pan. I add a pinch of salt and I stir fry for a few minutes until the veggies are tender and really vibrantly colored. Then I add in the pak choi leaves and I fold them in so that they wilt nicely in with the other veggies. If you wanted, you could drizzle a little bit of soy sauce on here, or you could just season with salt. Then I add my paste to some boiling water, the paste we made with the miso. And this will make a nice zingy zesty broth. And here I'm adding a pinch of salt as well, but again you could use soy sauce if you prefer that more umami flavor. Then we're ready to serve, so I pop my cooked rice into a deep bowl. Then it's time to pile on those delicious vegetables over the rice, and finally I'm ladling in that broth that really brings a gorgeous flavor to this. And while this is cooked and almost soupy, it has a really fresh flavor that goes great in the summer. And to top it all off, I like to sprinkle some toasted sesame seeds over all of it, and that concludes the first dish. Next up, we're gonna make a Caesar-ish salad with some delicious croutons and baked tofu. So to start, I'm gonna prep the croutons. So I just cut some stale bread into chunks, and I'm using Rob sourdough here, but I've tried this with my gluten-free bread as well, and I'm pretty sure almost any bread would work for this, at least a fluffy kind. So I'm adding the bread cubes into a bowl. I'm going to drizzle them with a little bit of olive oil that helps them crisp up in the oven. I'm also seasoning with some salt and some pepper, and if you wanted to, you could even sprinkle in some herbs here or some garlic powder or onion powder. Either way, I mix them up well, and then I set them aside while I cut up my tofu. And I'm using a pre-marinated tofu here that has a little bit of herbs and some savory, salty flavors in there. But you could of course marinate your own tofu. I just find it easier for my weekday dinners to buy it pre-prepped. And I cube it and I pop it onto a baking tray that I like to line so that I have to clean less. And then I add the croutons onto there as well. So I bake them at the same time, which makes this really easy. And I pop that into the oven for about 10-15 minutes. And in the meantime, I'm gonna make the dressing. And here I have some soaked cashews that I drain and rinse and then add to my blender. They are gonna form the base for the dressing, which would usually be made with mayonnaise, but I think this cashew version is really yum as well. So then I just squeeze some lemon juice into the blender bowl as well, and I add some nutritional yeast, which adds a little bit of depth and umami flavor. I'm also adding some garlic powder and some Dijon mustard. And for that proper Caesar flavor, I'm adding in some brine from a jar of capers. I'm also going to chop up the capers later and add them in. But first I'm cracking in some black pepper. I'm adding a pinch of salt as well as some water so that I can blend this dressing smooth, which only takes a minute or two in a high-speed blender. Once the dressing is all luscious and smooth, you can pour that into a jar, and we're gonna add the capers into there. So I grab the capers, which is called kapris in Swedish, as you can see, and I just chop it up, and you can chop it as fine or as rough as you want. And then I just pop that into the jar as well and mix it through. Now to the actual salad part of the salad. I'm chopping up some romaine and I'm just cutting it into 3 quite large chunks, and then I break it apart like this. I like the leaves to be chunky, but of course this is up to you. You can chop it as fine or as chunky as you want. Then I pop that into a big mixing bowl and I pour the dressing over the top so that I can mix that through the leaves. The dressed leaves form the base for the salad, and on top of that I sprinkle on some fresh chopped cucumber. Then my tofu and my croutons are also finished in the oven, so I sprinkle the tofu and the croutons over the top of the leaves and the cucumber. and you can never have too many croutons separately, so I add some more. And then I'm also adding on some fresh cherry tomatoes, which are so nice now that it's summer season here in Sweden. And finally, I'm finishing with some microgreens, and these are some microgreens I got from a friend that she had growing in her garden, but you can use any microgreen you like. It's just a nice way to finish off a salad, make it look a little bit more restaurant-y if you want to treat yourself. The third recipe I made is a cauliflower and chickpea coconut curry, and I love curries in the winter because they're warming, but I also love them in the summer because they do have that spicy heat that I think is really yum in the summer, especially with coconut milk through the curry. So to make it, I start by slicing up some onion. I'm also going to chop up some garlic because it wouldn't be a curry without garlic, I don't think. I'm going to add in a fresh tomato, but this is not strictly necessary because we're going to add chopped canned tomatoes as well. I just like to have the chunks through the curry when I eat it, so I just chop that into chunks and I set that aside while I prepare some kale that I'm also going to put into the curry. Again, this is optional. You could also use other types of greens if you want to, but I'm going to use kale, so I rip the leaves into pieces, bite-sized pieces, and I set them aside, but I keep hold of the stems and I just chop them up finely. I set the kale stems and leaves aside as well, and I prepare the cauliflower. So I just chop it in half and then break it apart. So I've got the leaves, I've got the florets, and I've got the stem that I'm all gonna chop up. So now I've cut up the cauliflower florets into bite-sized pieces, and I wanted to say that for the past year or so I've been more mindful to eat the whole vegetable, so to reduce my food waste. So we're actually going to include the cauliflower leaves in this, as well as the cauliflower stem. And you'll see when we cut this up that I removed the very outer part of the stem because it's kind of hard, whereas the center is really delicious and tastes just like the rest of the cauliflower, and so do these leaves. So it's actually really silly that I've been throwing these parts away for so many years. And the same goes for the kale. You saw me chopping up the stem into these little pieces, and I'm actually gonna just saute these with the onions so that they become soft and tender, and yeah, they just taste like the rest of the kale plant, and why throw them away when we can just eat them up, right? So yeah, I just wanted to say that and hopefully inspire you to also eat these parts of the vegetable that we often forget. This last bit of cauliflower chopping concludes the prep of the vegetables, and I'm ready to cook the curry. So I drizzle some oil into a Dutch oven, but you could use a pot or a big frying pan or a wok as well. And I place the onion, the stems from the kale, and some salt in there, and I saute it until it's softened and a little bit golden. Then I add in the garlic as well as the cauliflower, all the pieces of cauliflower, and I saute for another couple of minutes to start softening them up. And I like to season with salt at every step here so that the flavor builds from the ground up. Then I add in the tomatoes as well. I add in some grated ginger, some chili flakes, as well as some turmeric powder before adding in my curry powder, which obviously is the main flavor profile of the spices. Then I mix those through and saute another minute before adding in some chopped tomatoes. I'm also adding in a can of full-fat coconut milk. And I'm going to let this simmer together for about 15 minutes or so that all those flavors can marry together and the sauce can become a little bit thickened. But I also add a little bit of water so that it's not too thick. I also like to add in a stock cube or some stock powder to give that deeper flavor. And yeah, just give it a good stir and let it simmer away. So while this is simmering away, I just wanted to say something about curry powders, because here in Sweden at least, I grew up with just one type of curry powder. It was a very yellow curry and it's tasty, but for this kind of food I prefer to have, I don't know, something a bit more authentic tasting, a bit more like an Indian flavor. And for this I found this actually in the supermarket. These days there are better versions than the traditional Swedish curry, and I'm sure in many other countries you can find more interesting curry powders these days. So this is just a Madras curry powder, and if you're in Sweden it's by Vanish, and yeah, it's yum, it's lasted me a while, now it's empty. But my favorite curry powder is actually this, which I've bought in Mauritius, and that doesn't help many people. But with this I want to say that going to the world food market for spices is really useful. You can find better tasting products and especially spices there that will make a big difference to your food, I think. And I'm sure you can find similar kind of curry powders there. This is just a mixed masala curry powder. And yeah, you can also buy them in different varieties of spiciness or hotness, do you say that? So yeah, just be mindful if you're sensitive to spice. Don't buy one that says like with chili or says spicy, buy a mild one. And yeah, to my eyes, this packaging will always look a bit more like attractive. That doesn't mean that this curry powder is better than this, because I still think this is better than that. So don't be fooled by the packaging. Yeah, just buy a few different ones maybe if you haven't tried that many, and see which one you like the best. But yeah, that was a little rant about curry powder. I hope it was helpful, and let's keep going with this dish. I'm cooking some rice to go with my curry, so I just rinse it and cook it like I said before. And this week I just had white rice on hand, so that's what I'm cooking. But you could totally eat this dish with bread or some other grain that you like. And while the rice is cooking and the curry is cooking, I'm rinsing off my chickpeas that I'm going to add to the curry in just a minute. When those 15 minutes of simmering time are up, the flavors have come together, the cauliflower is soft, and I'm adding in my kale leaves as well as the rinsed chickpeas, and I just fold them through and let that simmer for another minute or two to warm up the chickpeas and to soften the kale. And I'm also seasoning one last time to taste, and then the curry is ready to serve. To serve this dish in a more fun way, I've packed the rice into a small bowl, and then I turn that over into the serving plate so that you get this nice round shape of the rice. And then I place the curry all alongside that rice ball, and I top with some toasted seeds and a squeeze of lime, and this is just delicious. I hope you try it, and I hope you love it as much as I do. On the Thursday, I made a kimchi fried rice using the leftover rice from the day before. And to go with this rice and the kimchi, I'm chopping up some smoked tofu into cubes, which will add a little bit more protein to the dish and makes it a little bit more satisfying. And for the millionth time in this video, I'm also chopping up some garlic. I think it's obvious that we love garlic in this house, but yeah, I just chop it up and it's gonna be cooked along with the kimchi rice. And then I also slice up some spring onion that I'm gonna use to garnish later. And those spring onions are the last thing I'm chopping for this recipe, so it's pretty low maintenance. And we're ready to cook. So I'm adding a little bit of oil to my frying pan, and then I'm adding the tofu cubes first so that I can get a little bit of a surface on each side of those cubes before I cook the rest of the ingredients in there. Then I add in the garlic and I saute it for about a minute or until it's fragrant, and then I'm ready to add in some gochujang, which is a Korean red pepper paste. It's a little bit spicy and it's not essential, but it adds a nice flavor. So if you don't have it, don't worry, you can still make this. Then to the star of this dish, of course, is the kimchi, and I'm adding it into the pan and just sauteing it for a few minutes to let the flavors really cook through. And then we're ready to add the rice. And the rice has been in the fridge overnight, and it's actually better like this, that you're using a little bit stale rice. So I cooked that through for a few minutes as well. And it's nice to let it catch a little bit in the bottom, so don't be scared. Then I season with some soy sauce and I stir that through, of course. Then, as I said, you can see here that my rice has caught a little to the pan, and this is actually just delicious. So just scrape it off with a spatula and let that be part of the flavor profile of the dish. And once it's all cooked through, you turn the hob off and you add a little bit of toasted sesame oil. This is really delicious and adds a yummy flavor that just finishes off this dish. Then I serve up my kimchi fried rice in bowls, and I'm going to top it with some select ingredients, and I'm starting with a sliced avocado. Traditionally, kimchi fried rice often comes topped with a fried egg, and I think this avocado is a nice creamy option to that is of course vegan. Then I sprinkle on my spring onions, and I'm also going to sprinkle on some toasted nori seaweed as well as some toasted sesame seeds. And that nori seaweed that I'm using, I bought pre-toasted with some flavorings, but you could totally slice up some toasted nori that's meant for sushi rolls. So just use whatever you have on hand, or leave it out if you don't have any. To finish off the week, we're making a roasted garlic and tomato spaghetti. And on Fridays we love to eat spaghetti for some reason. I think it just feels like a nice treat. And now in summer as well, eating fresh tomatoes and cooking with them feels like such a treat as well. So I'm really banking on that in this recipe. And I'm just starting by chopping up some tomatoes. And as you can see, I have different sized tomatoes, so I'm just chopping them to uniform size. Then I'm also preparing the garlic, no surprise there, and I'm just crushing them a little bit and removing the skin, and then we're gonna roast them whole together with the tomatoes. So I pop all the tomatoes as well as the garlic cloves onto a baking tray. And as you can see, I'm using my chopped tomatoes as well as some plum tomatoes as well. And I think it's really nice to mix the tomatoes, but you could use any type of tomato you like. Just chop them if they're big or keep them whole if they're small. Then drizzle some olive oil and sprinkle some salt and black pepper over the top. And then they're ready to roast for about 20-25 minutes, or until the cherry tomatoes are popping open and it's all nice and juicy. In the meantime, we're going to cook our spaghetti in a well-salted pot of water with lots of water so that the spaghetti has space to cook. And then just pop my spaghetti in there. I'm using a gluten-free corn spaghetti, but you could use any kind that you like and that suits you. So then we just wait for the pasta to cook until it's al dente, and then we drain it. And I keep some of the cooking water for later, and then I put the pasta into a bowl, and here you can see the tomatoes all done. So we pop those tomatoes and all those yummy juices into the bowl with the spaghetti, and then I'm gonna drizzle it with some more olive oil and just toss it together to combine. And if you find that the pasta goes a bit dry here, that's when you're going to use that reserved pasta cooking water, because that's going to add to the sort of sauce of the dish, and it's also going to season it with that little bit of salt in the water, or quite a lot of salt to be honest. but you will also season to taste with salt and pepper as you toss it together. Then it's ready to serve. This is a really simple dish that somehow is still really luxurious to me. I love using these fresh tomatoes, like I said at the beginning. It's nice to use these summer vegetables now that are just bursting with flavor at the moment, so make the most of it. And to top it all off, I like to grate some vegan cheese on top, as well as adding some fresh basil. Again, herbs are such a nice summer ingredient, so make the most of it. Put it into anything you can, and then we're gonna finish this off with a crack of black pepper, and that's this final dish done. With such a simple dish, it can be nice to add to the nutritional value with some sides, and I could recommend a bean salad with this and maybe a green salad, and that would be awesome. I've really enjoyed cooking up these weeknight meals for you guys. I hope you've enjoyed seeing what we like to eat in our home. Please let me know down below what you think, and like and subscribe if you like what you see. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.